Hi, everyone, and welcome to Heal Endometriosis Naturally with Wendy K Laidlaw. Wendy has spent the last 2 years helping women with various stages of endometriosis to heal naturally after putting her condition into remission. After her own healing success from stage 4 endometriosis and adenomyosis, she's inspired to heal others, and her goal is to help some of the 175 million women know that there is another way other than painkillers, drugs, or surgery. This is the place to be for real talk with real people for real results, so you can learn how to heal your endometriosis naturally. Please note that the opinions expressed in this program may represent options, but are not a substitute for proper medical care. Before starting any new healthcare program, we recommend you consult with a health professional.
So good to meet you. I was intrigued when your assistant reached out and said you wanted to be on the podcast. And yes. Maybe you could tell me why. Why heal endometriosis naturally? What about my podcast intrigued you?
Well, whenever I subscribe to a lot of podcasts that way, and I always look at what people are doing out there, and when they start to have good congruent information, I actually start watching their stuff, and I start looking at what they have doing that way, and it caught my eye, and I'm like, it'd be great for us to have a nice conversation about that way, so it's I'm always intrigued by great like-minded people that are doing good things, and I believe that all the information that women can get from a different viewpoint that way is fantastic. So that's why I loved your podcast. That's why she reached out to you that way, and so it's kind of nice.
And here we are. Exactly. Yeah. Great. So tell me about your own story. I mean, I read your book, so you've been involved in hormones and testing and things for quite some time, but maybe for the listeners, you could write a bit of background of your story, your journey.
It just started as me being a sick kid and almost dying from allergies, and that got me intrigued into the whole healthcare realm. And it was kind of neat because I came from just a poor country town, and I reacted to an egg so badly that I almost died, and therefore it led to me thinking about health, and because I didn't want to die. And then through that process, I learned about natural means because the medical profession wasn't really helping me. And of course, then I decided to get my education in nutrition, go to chiropractic school, do my naturopathic training and things like that. And then, of course, just before I get done with school, I ran into my beautiful current wife and stuff like that when I was just finishing up college, and she was told that she could never have kids. But that didn't make sense to me. She suffered from endometriosis, endomyosis. They almost took her uterus out when she was actually 19 years old because of all the devastation. And then I realized I started in my own aspect, being a kid that almost died from food allergies. I was very big in the labs and testing, so my whole undergraduate and graduate career, being a doc, I actually really got into detail of labs. And then when they told my wife she couldn't have children, I was like, that makes no biological sense. So then I started to realize that I said, let me see your testing. And I realized that their testing is major than complete. And I see that completely all over the world now, that natural or medical people are not testing women properly. And so I started to do it 20 years ago. And of course, now we have clinics all over the world. And so that's where it came that way. And so that's why sometimes when I just have a simple message of women, if you actually get tested properly, you'd be surprised what you can find. And to this day, I've still never saw one patient ever tested properly. So that's the uniqueness of what I've brought in.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating, isn't it? And quite staggering and disturbing that at 19 years old, your what to be your future wife, they were talking about removing her uterus. I mean, I hear stories every day, every week from women. And I know I was told that myself, that the only way to cure, in inverted commas, was to remove everything. But I was lucky because my mother had endometriosis, had a hysterectomy, and it all came back. So it's very interesting, but also staggering that no one thinks to question it, because of course that's the culture, that's the conditioning. And that's why it needs more people like us to go, do you know what, you need to stop, you need to educate, you need to get a wide breadth of education and the right knowledge, because there is, I mean, and again, to put this out here as a medical disclaimer, if, you're listening to this, and you're probably not listening to this if the painkillers, drugs, and surgeries worked for you. You're probably listening to this because it's not worked for you and you're getting sicker. And if you're getting sicker, I always like to say to women, it's not your fault. You don't know what you don't know. But if you're listening to this, that's awesome, because then you're going to be learning new ways to investigate what's going on inside your body. And from what I'm hearing from you is one of the ways that you do it is through testing.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the complete aspect about it, because when you look at, endometriosis and its dominance in certain hormones or lack in certain ones, it's hard to actually take care of a person properly if you don't have a clear picture of what's going on with the woman's body. So, and if I persist, and I know there's a lot of argument in politics across the world about socialized medicine or private insurance and things like that, and people don't realize the thinking is so wrong when it comes to female hormones that guess what? It doesn't care who pays for it. You just have, if your approach is wrong, which all over the world, their approach is wrong. It doesn't matter if it's, I just did a podcast from Germany, okay, and podcast from Switzerland. They actually have socialized medicine. And guess what? The rate of female hormones increases every year. Female hormone problems increase every year. So the idea that we just keep on throwing more money or whoever pays for it with a bad idea, you just still get the bad idea results. So, yep.
Well, that's, and I think you touched on it, is like, where's the money? Because these things are big pharma. And I think it's also interesting too, as well, is what you do with the information that you get. I know early on for me, it was to distinguish, because obviously estrogen and progesterone, and we know there's many different types of estrogen, but progesterone predominantly tends to be, and again, I'm generalizing here, women with endometriosis, they tend to have low progesterone. And again, there's different readings you can get for estrogen. But yeah, exactly. I think it depends on what you do with the information as you use it. It can be a really good starting point if someone's wanting to do this journey by themselves. But equally, if you're going to be working with a professional who understands all the different elements to a human being, that's a really good indicator and a good thing to gauge as they're going along.
Absolutely. Well, it was kind of neat because when I actually tested my wife, and the doctors she saw, they actually at least tested 2 of the estrogens. But they said, well, that all looks normal and your progesterone's normal. But they missed her 4-hydroxyestrone, and there was her culprit. And so it was, and as we reversed that process, her uterus went back to normal, and obviously we have 4 daughters. So it was
that's amazing, and that's great for women to hear that. But I think as well is looking at these things, looking at the whole person, and that feels really important to me because again, the medical profession generally tends to look at people as body parts and organs, and if it doesn't fit within, if it fits within a certain parameter, they're like, oh, you're fine. But actually, each person, and that's where a woman tends to start to doubt her own sanity. They're not choosing to feel this way. They're feeling a certain set of symptoms or having signs in their body. And that's what they need to, develop more confidence, to have faith in the fact that just because a test has come back and said something, and I had many a test on my journey that said, you're absolutely fine, but yet I was bedridden and I had a mitochondria dysfunction, that the signs hadn't caught up. But I was able to speak to a doctor in Wales who was able to measure my mitochondria score. To say, this is why I was bedridden. So I think all these tests have got to be taken as part of a picture.
Absolutely.
As from what you were saying with your own wife. And it's amazing. She went on to have 4 daughters, and they were trying to take her uterus.
Yep. It's a beautiful story. It's kind of nice. And now we're just trying to share the message of actually getting women. See, that's the one thing where what frustrates me in the medical or natural realm that way, everybody's always throwing natural treatments out there. Or throw medical treatments. So I'm like, listen, each woman is so dramatically different. Without having that big picture testing on them. That's why I believe a lot of books or a lot of programs fail, is because they're always trying to generalize to all women. I still, in 20 years of practice and over 50,000 labs looked at women, I've still never seen 2 women's labs ever the same, ever.
Well, I'm so pleased to hear that, because that's why I get the success I do with my programs, because there are a certain set of protocols, but they're personalized to the individual, because no 2 human beings are the same. And everyone presents with, different symptoms, different signs, although there's a commonality, and that's where the medical field, I think, in general, and you're right, some of the natural people as well. I heard something recently, somebody said they profess to cure endometriosis with a little bit of ginger and water.
Oh my goodness.
I know. And I'm just like, no wonder people are like wary and scared and frightened, because, the information is just ridiculous. Some people might go, okay, I'm done with the medical field, I'm going to go the natural. And then they come across that, know? So it's good to be speaking with someone like yourself today who understands that. And if anyone's listening, who's listening on the podcast and on the YouTube channel, this is about the whole you, whole body, whole person, not just a body part or an organ.
Yep. And then it was interesting because as I started to actually really delve into women and their hormonal aspect and how it started to affect them psychologically, that was a big eye opener as a male, because testosterone affects us very differently than it does affect the women. Okay. Yeah. Because what happens is obviously testosterone levels are psychotically high compared to women. But then what is interesting, because I started to realize, and this was the big turning point for me about 5 years in the practice, I started to realize that, listen, women are so dramatically affected by mental stress compared to men because their progesterone can be dramatically drained from mental stress. Ours is not. Our testosterone stays good. We don't have much connection at all to cortisol from actually our testosterone. And that's why we see so much progesterone deficiencies, because cortisol and cortisone, so mental stress and inflammation, dramatically affect a woman much different than they affect a guy. And so that's why you see the biggest part of the book. I go, listen, obviously mental stress dominates a lot in women's lives because their hormones are very connected to everything that way. Guys, we're simple. Testosterone can make us focus on one thing. So we forget about everything else in life. And then I really started to realize in clinical practice that started measuring the whole cortisol rhythm with them that way, going, yes, mental stress is one of the biggest things that are really dominating the aspect. And with stress getting so high and the busy work week and the busy family life and the husband and all stuff like that, I was like, whoa. I see, for example, women, you got to be very careful with that mental stress because it will tank your progesterone faster than most things ever will.
Yeah. And in your experience, I mean, obviously there's the mental and the emotional elements that work in tandem. What do you suggest women do to support themselves emotionally and mentally for the stress levels?
It's really interesting because this happens a lot in the United States. It's quite crazy. Abuse is rampant. It's not a joke. It's really scary. Another thing. As a man, that I don't think anything like that. I couldn't imagine even. I can't imagine raising my wife to my voice to my wife that way. But abuse happens, and I've had to look at patients before and say, "Listen, I can now. This is where the natural realm does help a little bit more. I can get some CBD, get some California poppy, get some valerian, get some marijuana. I don't even care. Do you see what I'm saying? Because at least it brings the stress down in your body. But if you don't remove that stressor, there's that constant pebble in the shoe that's always that irritant there. But the one thing I did notice, one thing that, like I said, I'm clinically fascinated with women. Actually, it's not a joke. I'm clinically fascinated because our bodies are quite simple. Women's bodies are very complex, okay? And just by letting a woman know that mental stress was one of the dominant things on labs affecting her, that actually made a woman actually more secure and gave her now the realization that this is an issue that she has to deal with. Do you see what I'm saying? And now she can have discussions with her husband. She had discussions with her kids, discussion with her work. They say, listen, this is really affecting me physically. And most people see and it gave women the power basically to say, listen, this is really destroying my life. I have to get this under control. Because sometimes just by women knowing that it was actually a big step to their healing. Do you see what I'm saying? And so that's why I know a lot of guys, sometimes I get some very big criticism. They say, well, doc, you pander to women. No, I don't. We have it easy. Stress doesn't affect our testosterone. Our testosterone doesn't be drained that way. I just look and go and listen, as a dad, as a husband, I'm trying to create, no joke. I have over 180 employees across the world, okay? Women dominate, obviously, as far as employees. But I try even as a workplace, keep the stress down, because how can I go out and preach hormones and do this way and then run a high-stress business that way? That's what we don't do. I want to create the environment for actually everybody to thrive, including the fact that keeping that mental stress down, because otherwise it's just such one of the biggest tankers to female hormones, especially progesterone. Progesterone that way. Well,
that's right, because obviously cortisol and progesterone compete with each other, so that's a big thing. But I think it's really interesting you brought up abuse, because it has a huge impact on people, and obviously as human beings, we pick up energies from people, and again, abuse can come in many different forms. I think most people associate abuse with physical abuse, but actually the mental and emotional and psychological abuse can be far more damaging, because it's this underlying threat to the organism, if you like, which the instincts you pick up and therefore react with. So again, as part of my programs, all about empowering women, but doing so and really just coming to light what is underlying on the surface, because it could be a boss, it could be a parent, it could be a partner, it could be these people that I refer to as toxic people. That's me being polite. Toxic people that tend to kind of hang around people. And again, women with endometriosis, and I'm generalizing here, tend to be very sensitive, physically to other people round about, so they pick up any vibes like that. So again, it's all about empowerment, but then that's a very big word, and then it's how to help women define that as to what that means for them, finding their voice, and I think as well, if they've got a medical profession who are very much tend to be male dominated, and there you said, you identify that, females' bodies are different, obviously, from men. but they're dealing predominantly with the male medical side, that can be very stressful on the body when they're trying even just to get answers and feedback about what's going on inside their body.
Well, as a clinician, I get to speak at major conferences from medical to natural to actually church conferences, woman conferences that way. And you've did it really good in your presentations and stuff like that. And that's why I listened to your stuff. I was very impressed. Is the medical profession is so mechanistic. And I'm going to say this as a practicing male doc for 20 years. Most of your male medical doctors have no concept of what women go through. Yeah. So everything is mechanistic to them. Here,
do you realize that women will be jumping up and down when they hear a man say that? Well, they'll be listening to this going, yeah, finally a man that recognizes they don't know what we're going through.
I want you guys to think about this. I'm so fascinated with the female body. It's really simple. Ladies, it's not a joke. Testosterone's good on us. Our testicles produce 95 to 97%. We're cool. Nothing really affects us if we keep it good that way. I mean, think about this. This is the part that I tried to really push big time in the book that way, is you're actually a different human being if you're a cyclic woman every week of the month, mentally and physically. That fascinates me that the body can actually transform that way. See, I got enamored with the human body as a sick kid because it still fascinates me that we can cut our finger and the cells go exactly where they were before.
Yeah.
We put such massive trust into male and female doctors. And I'm sitting there going, man, you're missing the coolness right here.
Absolutely.
And the coolness about a female body, man, it changes even cooler. So what happened is, and that's why when I, as a clinician, because as my beautiful bride and my kiddos, my beautiful bride, I just watched her and I really started to dig in going, if I really want that uterus to change, if it's genetically programmed to be normal. Yeah. Doctors have convinced people that you're genetically programmed for bad. No, you're not. We're genetically programmed for normal function. So what's the disruptions? And then I really started to study women. I started to poll. Literally, get this. I would literally have polls in my office. Everybody come in, I'd put on the internet and poll it that way. And I really started to realize and get in the thought process of women going, okay, if mental stress, yes, there's a physical stressor. Ladies, we understand this. Any inflammatory thing, that's why I don't eat bad. That's one thing I would tell you this about your book and things like that. You've done an amazing job of getting them in the right direction. And so what I really started to do is, hey, listen, if we can get women to start to think differently about this, but also men, because get this. I've always said this, you read it in the book, okay, is the fact that I said, who stress out more, men or women? And everybody goes, well, women. And this is a serious question. I said, then, but who causes the women most stress? Men. And I'm trying to get men to understand women.
I'm laughing because I know there'll be other women listening to this laughing and feeling validated.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of it is trying to feel understood.
Yes.
And then this vicious cycle ensues.
Yes. And if I can get a couple, and that's the coolest thing. And what happened is, as a clinician, about 6-7 years in the practice, all of a sudden I had women come in, and then their husbands, who didn't want them to come in and spend their money in cash to get better, came in and said, you want something? My wife is happier. Our relationship is better. And I started to go, okay. Because even as a clinician, I was actually taught in that mechanistic realm. Do you see what I'm saying? And I started to realize, and I started to really delve in and go, okay, listen, there's that emotional component. And that's what it all stemmed in. That's why I believe why the book has already become a bestseller. Why, for example, I've been able to speak all over the world. Because once again, it doesn't matter what healthcare form, if it's universal or if it's like United States private insurance or if it's Medicare for all, blah, blah, blah. What happens is this. The thinking about female healthcare is dominantly wrong across the world. And that's why endometriosis, PCOS, cancers, everything, doesn't matter where it's going up. And it's people like you and I that are saying enough's enough. And we got to, that's why I love reaching out to podcasts. Say, listen, we all are on that same process just to make less sick people. And the cool thing that I'm really proud of, and you talked about the ginger thing, usually if there's an article, just take some ginger, they have some magic ginger that they have the best in the world to do, so buy my product. And anybody that sees my stuff, I don't sell anything. I don't.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to get women to understand, get tested. You get tested, you can figure out your own body. And you can get tested by anybody. That's
but then equally, the testing is part of the jigsaw puzzle of the whole thing, because as you've identified, there's I refer to it as the 5 Ps now. Yep. There's the 5 poisons, there's the produce, the food, there's the products, there's the environment, there's the property, there's the past, and then the people. So there tends to be a multi-layered approach. And things are good indicators, but what I try and encourage with the women that who work with me is to feel into their own body, to feel into their own emotions, start to have a relationship with their body in a new way, and hear themselves, because actually all the answers to what's going on are within them. As you pointed out, the finger cutting, that was pivotal for me on my journey. And I'm like, well, why is my finger healing and the inside's not healing? Our bodies are amazing and they're always regenerating. And, and what we're looking for is why it's not regenerating. Why is it inflamed? What's stopping the body from healing itself? Because that's all it always wants to do. And it's all to do with empowerment. And that's where it's great that I think some people feel like in competition with other people, but it's really important that us in the wellness industry, I'm writing in my journal today, I want to end all abdominal pain for women. That is my mission. End all, pain with a period is not normal. That is not what people should be going to bed for 3 days every month, or they should not be climbing the walls or having to kind of, flooding, that is just not normal.
Nope.
And the fact to be able, if they're listening to our podcast, women are listening to our podcast, and they know that there's some element to them saying, seek another way. There has to be another way. And there is another way. It's not well touted. And tends to be dismissed. And I put a podcast up just this week, actually. A former student had sent me a video of a gynecologist and another doctor discussing endometriosis. I don't know if you've had a chance to hear it. And she turned around at the end and she said to the camera, you cannot heal endometriosis naturally. And I just went on my rant. I don't normally do rants. And I've actually got another rant coming up in the next couple of weeks, because this woman reached out to me and said, she's had 12 surgeries and they're now talking about removing her bladder. It's the last organ in her abdominal cavity. And I'm just like, stop. When I have to stop. This is just, they're not, they're not looking at the root causes. They're just trying to manage symptoms, but at the same time leaving women devastated with the outcomes of these surgeries.
Yeah, and in our predominant thinking, that's why if you look at the first part of the book that way, I start off with an analogy. The reason why people say, and listen to podcasts, and why we get frustrated, because we come from a different way of thinking. I say, they're the fire department. They actually put out fires. Endometriosis, they consider fire, so they have drugs and surgery. So in their mind, they can't understand the reversal because drugs and surgery can't do it. But you and I are carpenters. Yeah. We understand what triggers fires, how to rebuild it. So to us, reversal is kind of like another day at the office.
It's a no-brainer. It's just a case of trying to figure out, what the cause is. And I talk about it like coming down through the layers of an onion. There's multiple layers, and we have to get to the core, and we'll eventually get it, because it's cause and effect. There's a reason why the body's reacting the way that it is.
And the nice thing I tell people, everybody's house is different. We may live on the same block, but you'll go into a suburban area, all the houses are different, and that's why when you go inside the house, there's a little bit different decorations. There's a little bit different blueprint that way, and that's why, for example, but here's one thing. The blueprint, the genetics are made to make the house normal and strong.
Yeah.
We're not genetically programmed for bad things. See, I always tell people, I say, listen, if your grandma had endometriosis and your mom does and you do, guess what? They didn't pass you down a bad gene. They passed you down bad thinking and bad habits that led to the same conditions that you now suffer with.
Absolutely. Well, we've heard about epigenetics and all that kind of stuff as well. We know that genes get turned on by different elements in the environment and different, conditions and things as well. But what about these women that are maybe listening to this and they're scared and they've had multiple surgeries and drugs and painkillers, and they're like, I'm scared because, in fact, one lady had said to me in my Facebook group, I feel like I'm going rogue. So there's that emotional thing, there's that fear. And I know myself, I felt like I was literally going out on my own, and I had no one there to support me. But what about these people that are thinking, but what if my doctor's upset? And what if, if I'm going rogue? What would you say to these women that are thinking that?
I see this all the time, because a lot of people say, my doctor said. And I'm not a nice doctor, so I say, your doctor's a moron. You saying? You're the one that is suffering. See, I don't understand this aspect about doctors. In 20 years, in all the offices I have across the country and the world now, for example, my doctors, for example, give you the mindset of saying, listen, understand, you're here because everything else failed.
Exactly.
So forget about this. And you know this. I guarantee I'm gonna say something that you've experienced as a health practitioner, as a person that does good things. I guarantee there's family members, past friends of yours, when you started to do things right, by nature, people didn't like you because what? You eat healthy, that means I do the bad things. Yeah. I'm a person, yeah, you do bad things, you're horrible. And stuff like that. And I have little parents go, well, I give my kids processed sugar. I'm a bad mom. Yeah, you are. Do you say it? Yeah, because I'm strong enough to say it. Now, once again, I'm not saying be controversial like that. Just understand, their opinion doesn't change your suffering. You're still suffering. So
I think the key thing is to reach out and get people to support you in your journey, because that's the thing as well. In fact, somebody said to me recently, but it's like almost like they're ashamed to need support or need guidance. And actually, if you are scared, to people like ourselves who been there, done it, worn the t-shirt and go count. That's why up until recently, my podcasts have been testimonials. There's nothing like saying this is real. I'm not just talking off the top of my head or just, publishing a book. This stuff works, and it works because, and if you can't do it by yourself, because my book is pretty much laid out, to give support, but everyone's different, as you say, every house is different and there's normally different elements. So it's not a sign of failure. It's a sign of strength in my book to reach out, maybe to get tests done, but certainly to work with someone to really get to the root cause of what's causing the inflammation.
Yes, find somebody. And the great thing is this, a little step in the right direction changes here. Here's one thing, ladies, I really want you to get this. Any step in the right direction, you will feel the change. That will create momentum, and you won't care what anybody says anymore. Because that's why, for example, is but when you're suffering, you need sometimes emotional support. That's why they got to join your group. That's why they got to listen to other practitioners. One thing I love about the internet, you can listen to people all across the world that way, and it's amazing. Heck, how do you think I found you? We live in that same world. Do you understand? That's why I love what you're doing. People always think it's funny now that I'm a male talking about. I'm one of the very few males talking about it, and one of the things I say as a male, nobody says. You saying? Because I really started to really look at women and go, oh my goodness, we got to get a message out there for women that, guess what? There are guys that do understand what you're going through. I can't experience it. I couldn't experience what my wife was going through with endometriosis and endomyosis and all things like that. But actually I can understand because I understand her body and her physiology that way. And now I'm sympathetic to that process that way. And so that's real for the sympathetic people, because there are there. Do you understand? But then with a little bit of momentum, you won't care what anybody says, because when your body starts going the right direction, you now know what it feels like to feel a little bit better.
Absolutely. And that word momentum's key, because once you start, I refer to it as putting a seed in the soil, and we're putting good food in, and we're giving it all the nutrients and the sunlight and the water and everything. And that seed, it's hard to stop that seed from growing. And I use this as the analogy because the body's always regenerating, always healing, always wanting to get better. And there can be a lot of stuff going on under the soil. The roots are starting to take root, because obviously, certainly through my foundation program, people start to week 5, week 6, they're starting, my skin is a bit softer and my hair's starting to grow in and the pain's starting to reduce. And then that's when the shoots come through the soil and they're really starting to build that momentum in their bodies. But it was interesting. I had somebody else reach out to me recently as well. And it turns out that their philosophy, again, because it's so important to really, I refer to it as information, education, and inspiration. You need to really absorb all the stuff that's out there. There was somebody saying that just pelvic floor exercises would cure their endometriosis. And I was outraged that, again, it's bad enough, and you understand that as a man, that women have to go through all this suffering and invariably the women I've been interviewing recently, Patrick, have been decades of suffering, Yep. For someone to say just a few pelvic floor exercises and we're gone is so insulting. But I was glad to speak to you too, because you are a male and you are passionate about this. And then therefore women whose partners or husbands are not really understanding or being sympathetic to them can listen to you as a man, go, this is real. It's not in their head. They're not making this up. And the doctor might be, male and might going, I think you're being a bit melodramatic and you're over empathizing. Normally, by the time women reach out, they've suffered for quite a long time in silence.
A long time. It's why one of my doctors in a different state, their patient actually named the second part of the book. See, it's called the Hormone Connection because hormones are connected to everything. Women understand that greatly. But it's called Ending the Battle Between the Sexes. Most men have no clue. because it's pretty simple for us. So therefore, if they understand each other, then there's that sympathy that way, not from a bad part, just that when a woman's suffering, now they actually understand that when all things come up. And I do want to make a point about that pelvic floor exercise aspect. A lot of people come to me and say, Doc, what do you think about this therapy? And what do you think of this therapy? I always tell people, I don't care if you go in the corner, stand on your head, drink a glass of water. If that gets rid of your stuff, I'm cool.
Exactly.
And what people do is this, and this is where that doctor's kind of speaking out of context, or any person that puts out like a ginger or a pelvic floor exercise. Here's what can happen. If that particular individual does pelvic floor exercises, and that was one of the major stressors that threw off their hormones, they could have gotten full recovery. That ginger could have gave that individual full-time recovery. But I call this the Dr. Oz effect. Dr. Oz obviously is the most dominant personality in natural health, which I totally disagree with him that way. He will have a person on there on a show that took turmeric and his one arm grew back. Do you understand? But then 3 million one-armed men go out and buy turmeric the next day because it's called 3 million. If he says turmeric, 3 million people go out and buy it the next day. The sad part is 2,999,999 didn't have their arm grow back. Yeah. See, so that's why when people say, well, you can't talk about my pelvic floor did change my endometriosis. I didn't say it didn't. I'm just saying that it can't affect everybody the same. And that's why when people use natural or medical remedies, the progesterone synthetically, the herb, the exercise, the ginger, once again, I'm not saying that any of those things are bad. It's just that there's no detail to a woman, and every house is so greatly different. So people are listening and say, but Doc, pelvic floor did help me. Cool. I'm cool with it. Do you understand? That was one of your stressors. And share that with other women, but just don't act like that's going to affect every woman the same.
Well, that's it. And I think people trying to look for the one quick wonder, don't they? That one thing. And that's what that used to really upset me too. Because invariably by the time women reach out to work with me, there are many different layers we need to look at. It's a multimodal approach to healing. And I think that then from a mental and emotional perspective makes people feel, because invariably women are thinking, what's wrong with me? There must be something wrong with me, and I don't know if I can carry on, and I'm doing everything everyone's telling me to do. But it's not that. If it was that simple, the condition wouldn't be around, and that's because that's what the medical are using as well. The painkillers and the drugs or the surgery, just kind of sledgehammer approach to an egg to try and get rid of something that it isn't that easy to do.
I have a very strong opinion, and you're going to agree with me 100% because I'm going to back up what you say, but I'm going to tell you after 20 years of practice, thousands and thousands of people all over the world that way, I'm going to give you such credit to what you just said this. So let's say, for example, that we do see progesterone off, which is one of the major dominant things with endometriosis, or really almost any female condition, because estrogens is going crazy, really affect a woman's body negatively. Don't get me wrong, you can have low estrogens, osteoporosis, but let's just start with the progesterone aspect. In 20 years, and all thousands of people, I have still never seen just one thing wrong with a woman. Because you know why? They could have had a bad mental morning, they could have ate some sugar, they could actually, the weather, atmospheric pressure can change. They actually come in contact with a bunch of radiation from EMF, from their cell phone. They have all these factors bombarding their body, and it can't adapt anymore. And of course, then there's a drain to the body that way. So this whole concept comes from medicine, that they're looking for one pill, come from natural medicine, looking for one herb and things like that. But there's so many things. Do you understand that if you get a sliver, ladies, that's a stress to the body. It drains your progesterone. Do you understand if you have a bad thought? Do you understand if you have a bad food? Do you understand if you stub your toe? Do you understand if you actually walk into a room with a bunch of negative people there? See, there's not any, but see, that's the whole idea of a practitioner, is to get you to think, saying, listen, I just got to reduce all these stressors, and then this is going to start to go back to where it was, which is called normal.
That's right. And that's it, exactly. And I refer to it as a tool bag, helping empower people to have a tool bag in which they've got resources. Yes. They're able to identify and have a relationship with their own body. And I know some people said it's a bit weird, Wendy, you talk about having a relationship with your body. And I'm like, well, no, before I just this head just dominated the body, and I zoomed around 100 miles an hour until literally my body went on strike. I had no relationship with my body. I had to understand the signs, what the little whispers were before they came screams, and that's, and they're and for women to learn what's going on inside their body is the most amazing thing, because as you say, it can be quite complex. But then that also builds confidence, that also reduces fear, which also reduces cortisol, which also, the body's always trying to get back into balance and always trying to realign. And that's what we're working for. So if people want to get your book, where is it available?
Actually, here's what happens. It's kind of cool. If you're across seas, it's only a format in ebook that way. So you can, if you go to my website, www.drpatrickflynn.com, or if you just Google search my name or Google search Wellness Way, you can get the ebook that way from across seas. Otherwise, trying to ship it across seas, it's kind of tough. So that's why we have the ebook that way. And
I'll speak to you about that when we're off air, because there's a way you can do that. So,
cool. Because like I said, I always tell people, and here's what happens. You don't even have to buy the book. Guess what happens is you can actually just, I'm also, if you go on Facebook, I just do a ton of information. That's it. And I know one thing I can promise anybody. There's no selling on anything ever. But the one thing is I really want women to understand how their body works, what goes on. Like I always tell people, because it's so dramatically different. And if they understand, now they know what choices they make. Because once again, it's that lifestyle that way. So I always just want people to understand. So like I said, go to YouTube. You can watch I just did a huge video on PCOS that, got 1 million views already. Why? Because once again, they're so multifaceted. The only thing I really like to do on a lot of my information is put up tests and show this past weekend, I did a video on PCOS, and I took 4 women that suffer from PCOS, showed their labs, and they were dramatically different, even though they suffered from the same condition. Yeah. And I gave the idea and the scenarios on how you can actually start to that reversal process that way. But each one was different. So if all 4 of those took ginger, maybe 1 would have a positive effect, but the other 3 wouldn't. So they said fail. So I'm really just about getting people to understand, I'm really about labs. You know what I'm saying? That's what I want to tell you. I just like to test a person's body to see where it's at that way. And across by your doctors can do all labs. I just believe most lab testing is incomplete. So I consistently put out there for free, here's what labs a woman should have done on a regular basis that way. And here's what happens. Don't get them from me. I don't sell them. I just want women to get tested so now they can have that relationship with their body and understand what's going through that way. So I'm just an information person. That's all I am. And people just like to watch my stuff because they know they're not going to have some magic $19.99 supplement or medication at the end.
Sure, absolutely. No, well, that's it. And I think it's good that you're sharing all this. And I think ultimately, we're in parallel because, I think this is part of the jigsaw puzzle. And ultimately, I'm sharing with women tools that they can then learn what the body needs without necessarily testing. They'll be able to tune in, have such an amazing... I think tests are a great indicator to help build up that confidence, to help that clarification, even just to, to get that validation that something's off if they need it. But I think what we're both saying to everyone who's listening is that, there is another way. If you are like sick and tired of feeling sick and tired and you want to take back power and control of your body, then don't sit in despair and don't delay, because your life's too short. And I mean, you suffered, when you were younger. I've suffered for 33 years, and I don't want any woman to ever have to end up as ill as I was.
Yes.
To be bedridden for 3 years was just the most depressing thing ever. And, so if you're, join the Facebook groups that we're both in, reach out and get help and support. Don't sit there and feel like there's something wrong with you for doing so, because there isn't. But look, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been amazing. And I will put links and things in the podcast so people can reach the Wellness Way and reach out to you. And maybe great to have you on again in 6 to 12 months and see where you are and what you're doing.
Yes, and let me know when it goes there, because I'd love to share it with my audience. We have a huge audience around the world that follows us that way, and I'd love them to see what you're doing and take a look at your book and get them to get it. So thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate being on.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to Heal Endometriosis Naturally with Wendy K Laidlaw. And I hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and rate us. If you're interested in learning more, you can download your top 5 jumpstart tips at healendometriosisnaturally.com and jump on the VIP email list. Remember to keep you number 1. The world needs a healthy you.